Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second and final Virtual Code Club training. If you haven't already checked out our Intro to Code Club video, I would strongly urge you to do so before proceeding. Otherwise, let's get straight into it. So by the end of the session, we will cover what makes Code Club different. We're also going to be talking about Code Club modules and project structures, online safeguarding, using video conferencing tools, online group management tips and tricks, an example virtual Code Club session, the first two Code Club sessions as well, and then next steps. Normally, we'd have a Q&A if this were live or in person, but given that that is not the circumstance, we will provide you with some contact information to get in touch with us quickly. So what makes Code Club different? It's the spirit of Code Club, the accessibility, flexibility, and fun that this program has to offer. So a Code Club can really be anything a community needs it to be. We define them normally as being a safe space to learn, a place for kids to improve their skills, or an opportunity to make new friends. You can choose a day and time, projects, and session structure based on whatever works best for your club leaders and participants. When you join Code Club Canada as a registered host or volunteer, you become part of the local and global vision to give every child the skills, confidence, and opportunity to shape their world. Being a part of Code Club Canada gives you access to free resources, projects, and support from regional Kids Code Jeunesse community developers. So what does a typical session look like? You may have seen this slide in our previous video, our Intro to Code Club session. And I thought it would be great for us to just cover this again, just as a brief reminder. So it's really completely up to you. Code Club sessions, in person or virtual, are flexible depending on the interest of the participants and the volunteer or staff member in charge. But here are some ideas on how to start. Make the space inviting. Start by minimizing distractions and engage the group. Start at the beginning. Lay a foundation so that everyone feels confident. Encourage different skill levels to help each other, allow kids to explore other projects. So this would look like dissecting a project, remixing it, or just simply making it their own. Make time for sharing either before or at the end of your session, and keep it casual. Code Club shouldn't feel like summer school for the participants or for you. So here are the programming languages that Code Club has to offer. Scratch and Python being the most popular of the two. Scratch is a beginner-friendly block-based coding program that allows kids to create some really cool animations. And Python is a more intermediate advanced level for participants who are looking for a little bit more of a challenge and first look at what text-based programming can look like. We also offer programs in HTML, CSS to develop our web page skills, and also Microbit, which is an opportunity for anyone kind of sitting between block-based coding and text-based coding. If they're not comfortable making the jump to one or the other, then this one offers both. Our free projects are step-by-step guides which help young people learn to create their own games, animations, and web pages. I've also linked here in the slides our project page. I'd strongly encourage you to go run through one yourself. Put yourself in the participant's shoes, and if it's not feeling right, then please provide us with feedback. Otherwise, I'm sure you'll be enjoying yourself. I know I do. So here's what our modules and project structures look like. Each project builds on skills learned in the previous project. So we actually have our skills map here, and there is a skills map for each of the programs that we offer. Again, something you can look at if you use the link in the previous slide to our project page. It is most common to start with Scratch. It's the most beginner-friendly of all four. And every coding language has at least one module with 6 projects. Scratch alone actually has 3 modules with 6 projects each, and that's about a year's worth of projects, so 3 terms. And if you're not familiar with our term yet, a Code Club term is really just defined as being a club that runs for 6 to 8 weeks. So before you announce your online club session, it would be a great opportunity to design the session structure and prepare your materials. So go through the skills map, check out the projects online, figure out what would work best for your participants. You also can skip this step simply by running through the projects as we've set them up on the website. We have set them up such that you are running through this exact skills map. So if that isn't in the realm of possibility for you, don't worry, don't stress about it. Hosts and volunteers, do not feel pressure to recreate the sessions by any means. But if it's something that you're interested in, then that's freedom that you have. Safeguarding for online clubs. Now, this is where we're going to see a little bit of a split in our training for hosts and volunteers. So this slide is really great for hosts to consider, strongly consider. And volunteers, you can kind of keep this in the back of your mind. There are a couple points here that you will need to take into account, but for the most part, hosts will be taking care of these highlights. So let's start by parental consent. We need parents to be aware of the fact that their kids are taking part in this program. So however you tend to register kids through your normal programming, then that's how we'd suggest you do so for this specific program as well. Invite parents to sit in and monitor for appropriate online interaction if that's something that they want to do. And many online platforms that we use, so be it Zoom, Google Meets, they require parents to sign in on a child's behalf or to authorize their accounts if the learner is under 13. So if a kid is using a parent's account, it's best that they know that it's happening. And if there's authorization required, we need the parent to be authorizing this. Volunteers, here's the time to open your ears again. So keep all communications in the open. Avoid platforms that allow private messaging between learners or yourself and the learner. We encourage running online sessions with at least 2 adult club leaders in each virtual environment. So be that with 1 volunteer and a staff member in charge, 2 staff members running the session, or even 2 volunteers and a staff member who's supervising. We see that a lot. It's a really great layout for our current clubs that are running. It's always a help to have a staff member from the host organization sitting in and just monitoring the club. Last piece here, do not use social media to engage in these remote sessions, and do not share personal details with the learners over any of these communication platforms. That goes for hosts and volunteers, by the way. Moving on, hosts, this is something that I wanted to make sure was on your radar. And volunteers, this is something that you need to strongly consider if you want to continue supporting community-led code clubs. So Code Club Canada recommends background checks, and a venue will often require it. You have 2 options, volunteers. Either you get one from a police station near you, or you can also use our background check service through Verified First. We are currently managing our volunteers through Volgistics, a volunteer management platform. And through this platform, we have a Verified First subscription, if you will. So it's a free service. All we require from you is a signed consent form so that we can get the check completed. Moving on to choosing a video conferencing tool. So there are a lot of different tools that you could use to host an online club session, and they vary in functionality, cost, and usability. Here are a few things to keep in mind. Hosts, this is the most important for you, but volunteers, something to keep in mind if you ever consider running your own club. So you need one that keeps all the communication open to everyone. Private messaging between participants or between leaders and participants can be a safeguarding risk. Some require young people to have an online account, so this may be an issue for learners below the age of 13. Some need to be installed on a learner's computer, so this may be an issue for learners without administrative rights to their computers. And some work on multiple operating systems and web browsers. Another consideration to keep in mind is its price. So if it's free to use, then by all means, that's the better way to go. We have seen some limitations with Zoom specifically. With our free accounts, you only have 40 minutes or so to run a session, but Seeing as Code Club is accessible and flexible, this isn't a problem. If you need to shorten the workshops to 40 minutes in order to keep your free account, then that's absolutely fine. Definitely something we can work around. So hosting on video conferencing tools. Before the club sessions, your communications with club members outside of the club sessions should be directed to the young people's parents, and when possible, and not directed to young people. So hosts, this is the biggest piece for you to take into account. And if you're already running programming, this is something you already know. Share the link to your online session privately so that only the people you're inviting are able to attend. And any instructions that are needed to join should be included in this communication as well. Share what you're planning for learners to work on. You can include links to any online projects or PDF files they may need. We don't see this too much. We do like seeing the kids kind of be surprised. But if parents are asking for curriculum content, or if the kids are looking for that as well, then you can always send them the information from the Code Club website. So at the start of your club sessions, it's crucial that we get kids familiar with the interface. We're lucky that kids now have been exposed to many of these conferencing tools, but it doesn't hurt to just go through the basics with everyone before jumping into anything. So share your screen and go through each feature. Volunteers or staff members from the host organization, this is something you're going to need to keep in mind if you're facilitating the workshop. So establish rules with the kids at the beginning on using video, audio, chat, screen sharing, and communicate how you'll handle questions, kids going off topic, or kids who may be falling behind. Plan an icebreaker activity for the start to help kids get familiar with the tools and each other. This icebreaker activity can simply be asking a question about their week, if they did any programming during the week, or if it's your first session, you can ask them if they've ever done any programming. You don't need to go to any great extent to come up with some groundbreaking icebreaker activity. But if that's something you want to do, then by all means do that. Finally, decide if you want to divide learners in any way, so by age, programming language, or level of support needed. And make sure that separate breakout rooms have a trained club leader in each. So we see this quite a bit where we have a beginner group and a more intermediate or advanced group working at the same time, and they're just in breakout rooms. But we do have, if your host has volunteer support, then normally we have 2 volunteers per breakout room, a facilitator and a moderator. And there's a host staff member jumping between the two to monitor appropriate use of the conferencing tools. Otherwise, if it's just staff members running the sessions, we strongly encourage having 2 members there, especially if your groups are bigger. But if you can only have 1 staff member per group, then that's absolutely fine as well. So managing a group of kids online. Here are a couple of tips. I won't get too much into it, as we do offer add-on trainings. These are free as well, but we do go a little bit more in depth. So if this isn't enough for you, then feel free to sign up and join us for a brief 30-minute add-on training to cover these things in a little bit more in depth. So we always, I've already mentioned our icebreaker activities quite a bit, and this is really just an opportunity to get the kids engaged. So getting them engaged is awesome. First of all, you get to know the group that you're working with, so you kind of get a gauge for that interaction, but it's also great to break the ice, as it were, and get them talking, get them engaged in the workshop. It bites a little bit as a facilitator if your kids aren't answering any of your questions, or if they're all just super quiet and all have their videos off. So if you can take advantage of that very first session, at the very first 5 minutes you have with them, to make them understand that this is really cool and we're having a fun time together, then it'll run a little bit more smoothly. So if a child is goofing around, being negative or disruptive, we aren't here to parent kids by any means, but if it's getting in the way of the workshop rollout, then it definitely needs to be addressed. We've had cases where kids will go a little too far with the emoji options, for example, I just kind of blast the chat box with emojis, and it actually buries any questions that end up coming up in the chat. So those kids end up missing out on answers that they need, or it just ends up delaying those answers until the moderator can sift through the emojis to find the questions. So we tend to start by addressing the issue, but we don't address it as being an issue, if that makes sense. So we come in and say, hi, so-and-so, really happy that you're so engaged and that you're so enthusiastic. I really love those emojis, but it's actually getting in the way of all the questions that were being asked. And we really want to finish this project today. So if you could just keep that for the end, I'm happy to stay on for a couple more minutes to chat about your favorite emojis or just send a bunch to each other. But for the time being, we just need to move on a little bit more with the project. So please keep that for the end. Thank you. If it's persistent, then we do ask the staff members to kind of take other measures, whether that be asking the child to leave the session or getting a parent involved. We haven't seen anything escalate to that degree, but it happens sometimes. So just something to keep in mind. So what to do if a child has a question or is falling behind? We suggest get other kids involved to support asking or answering questions or supporting that kid in further developing their project, or B, asking the rest of the group to continue along using the Code Club website project, the step-by-step project there that we link at the beginning, to go through the next couple of steps. And as they do that, you'll have a bit of time to work one-on-one with the kid who's falling behind. What if a participant is ahead or knows more than you? Well, there are also two ways to deal with this as well. I'm sure you can find others, but we suggest asking them to take on more of a leadership role within the group. So maybe saying, okay, well, can you take over the chat and see if anyone needs help? Or, okay, well, I'll step off for a sec and I'll let you walk us through this step. So how about you share your screen and show us what you've done? Another option, B, would be to encourage them to check out other projects on the Code Club website, maybe get started with those. Again, you can kind of bridge those two options and say, okay, well, how about you go check out a new project or next week's project and start practicing delivering the second and third step. I'd like you to run through that with the group next week if you're comfortable. Really fun ways to get the kids a little bit more engaged, and you don't need to make the kids feel like they're not part of the group anymore because they're more ahead. If there's several kids that are far more ahead than the rest of the group, then it would be a great opportunity to consider breakout rooms. What if we finish the project too quickly? And what if we don't have enough time to finish the project? So if you finish too quickly, that's absolutely fine. I don't really think there's such thing as too quickly. You either have more time to for discussion with your group or a little more time to share projects at the end, maybe share goals for the workshop, ask kids what they want to be learning, take all of that into account. You can also start the next project if there's just a lot of time left. If you don't have time to finish the project, you just pick up from where you left off the next week, or you can assign homework so that the kids do it during the week and then come back the next and you guys can share the finished projects. So here's an example of an online session agenda. Normally we have 5 minutes to get everyone settled in. 5 to 10 minutes is your introduction and kind of your icebreaker / engagement section. And then normally we have about 40 minutes to go through the project. The final 10 minutes or 5, depending on the time you have, is a show and tell opportunity and a Q&A as well. If any kids are struggling or if they have questions about the next week, whatever it may be, we like leaving a little bit of a buffer at the end so that we can address anything. So here's what your first Code Club day can look like. This is a suggestion. We've seen a lot of volunteers and hosts just jump straight into the projects and not really make a first session. But if you're looking for something other than the first project of the platform that you chose, then this would be a suggestion. So here we've taken Scratch as an example. You can introduce computer coding, have a bit of conversation about that at the beginning. This can last however long you want it to. introduce the platform, so Scratch, for example, talking a little bit about where the name came from. We've had a lot of volunteers and host staff members come up with some really cool, fun facts about the platforms that they're using and share those with the participants. It's been really well received. And in some cases, the participants also throw some in there as well. For Scratch specifically, there are a couple pieces of, or there's a little bit of vocabulary that you'll need in order to follow along. So if there's the same for Python, HTML, or microbit, then it would be a great time to throw that at the group as well. Introduce the basics of the platform that you're working with. And then Scratch is the only platform here that requires account sign up. Hosts, if you're running Scratch programming, please include sign up information in your communications to parents. It makes the world's difference if volunteers can just get started and kids already have accounts set up. Otherwise, volunteers and or staff members who are facilitating the workshops, it would really be worth you taking 5, even 10 minutes of the first session to make sure that everyone gets set up with an account. Hosts, something to keep in mind as well. We understand that participants vary from week to week. Occasionally we have new people join us. So if that's the case, please make sure once again that they have set up their accounts prior to the workshop. It'll save time for the volunteers and any other children who've already signed up their accounts. And this will most likely take the hour. If it doesn't, continue on with any topics for discussion. Ask the kids what they'd like to be learning or if they have any expectations for the course. And if not, you can get started with the first project. So Code Club Day 2, or week 2 rather, if you're not running this as a full week program. So I've linked our projects page yet again. I would suggest that you go through a project here and just put yourself in the participant shoes. If you're working with a team, so if it's several staff members at your organization, if you're a host, then I'd suggest maybe having a group call and going through the project together. If it's a group of volunteers, feel free to do the same. We do connect you with your peers, so if you're looking to kind of get an idea for things, then do it together. It's a lot more fun. Here's a bit of a workshop setup checklist. So get to know your group. Start by asking for everyone's names. Sometimes they join with their parents' accounts. It defaults to their parents' names. We end up calling them by their parents' names the whole time, and it just gets really awkward. So this could be the very first thing you start with, is just asking everyone's names, specifically for day 1, but if you have any new people join, then ask their names as well. Ask for their coding level, interests, etc. Get used to the platform. So get participants to use the chat, unmute the microphone, and use the camera if they're comfortable doing so. Send the platform link to participants. So through the Code Club website, you'll be provided a link. You can just copy paste that right into your chat box, get everyone to open the tab. And then ask participants to set up 2 separate tabs. So by clicking on the platform link, they'll kind of do so by default. But it's great to walk them through flipping between the meeting tab and the coding tab. This is if they're using the same computer to code and follow along with. If they're using separate devices, then they don't need to worry about it. The one caveat for volunteers and hosts to keep in mind is that any students or participants using 2 separate devices will have a little bit more trouble sharing their projects with the group at the end. Holding an iPad screen up to a laptop is not the easiest thing to do, and holding a computer up to a laptop can cause some problems. So it's worth mentioning to the students, or participants rather, that if they're having, that if they'd like to use 2 separate devices, feel free to do so, but it may cause a couple issues with sharing in the end. So finally, we have address any questions and or concerns, and then you can get started. An example of getting started would be describing the project and goals thereof. Demoing the final project, you can find a demo on the Code Club website, and then show the Code Club steps page as a support resource. So again, that separate tab where they can follow along with the workshop steps. They can also, or they will also have their coding page open, but the actual project page is an awesome resource in case any tech issues arise, or if they're having trouble following along. It's great for them to have as a resource. If they're way ahead, then they have all the steps in front of them and they can just get everything done. So I strongly urge you to send those project links at the beginning of your sessions. Volunteers, that's huge for you, or any staff members that are facilitating workshops. Please keep that in mind. Finally, this is our training roadmap. So both volunteers and hosts go through similar training. We do offer additional support. So hosts and volunteers, you've both seen the intro session workshop video or recording, and this is our second. So we've completed the two, and this is kind of a foundation for our training. Our additional support are add-on training workshops. So we have an Eventbrite set up. We'll send you that link so that you can join us. It's 6 to 8 workshops, and they're all 20 to 30 minutes long, and we're covering different concepts, I guess, from Code Club. So if you're having trouble getting your head wrapped around facilitating a workshop, then we have a workshop specific to the facilitation role. There's also one for moderating. There's one to better understand your impact with Code Club. We also talk about frequent challenges with Code Club as well, be that a staff member who's hosting the club, or volunteers running, or staff and volunteers running them together. There are always challenges that come up, and so we want to make sure that you're best supported. So feel free to join us during those trainings. They are delivered on a bi-weekly basis. You can also contact our Code Club coordinator or your local community developer with any questions you have, any and all questions, I'll add. We welcome all feedback, so please let us know how we can improve by filling out the form linked in this slide deck. You will receive a copy of this slide deck in PDF format, so you should be able to click the links. If you aren't, then feel free to send us an email and let us know that you're having trouble. We'll be sure to get all this information to you. A couple other things to keep in mind: hosts specifically, confirm your participants. So see if parents and their kids are interested in joining the club. Register your club during or through our Code Club website, and access the additional free online resources after registration. Review the guide on hosting a virtual Code Club and the volunteer guidebook, Volunteers. Set up and communicate the club day, time, and way to attend, and then start the fun. You can find your regional community developer if you have any questions. As mentioned before, there's another link here if you missed it in the previous slide. But otherwise, we are really looking forward to hearing from you, to seeing you in our add-on trainings, and getting to know your club a little bit more. And if you're a volunteer, we're really looking forward to getting to know you more as well. So thank you all for your time today. Thanks for joining our second and last training video. We hope to be seeing you soon. Thanks.